Dan Landing, year 3. We're checking out the Ducks. They're on the practice field in Eugene. We got our guy Spencer McLaughlin here from Locked On Ducks, Locked On College Football. Hey, if we want to talk Oregon football, this is the guy to go to. Spencer, appreciate you stopping by, man.
Yeah, great to be back with you, Mark. Exciting to have, at least some semblance of football to talk about as opposed to the 3 months of speculation and such. But, the spring game on April 27th, it's a month away as we record this, and it's a day that everyone is looking forward to, let's just say.
Absolutely. And I got to admit, though, I look forward to it, and then it gets here, and I turn it on, and after about 3 plays, I do have to remind myself, okay, this isn't really football. So let's take it for what it is.
Yeah, it's close. It's closer than no football. That's about all you can. Well, it's not all you can say, but I will be watching every single play in the greatest detail imaginable.
Fortunately, most of the networks have caught on to that. It's a TV show. Let's talk to coaches. Let's develop storylines. We're not broadcasting a football game here. So that's
I think the way they've approached it is good. You got celebrity coaches from the program and everything like that, and it's about the fans and showing them what they have to look forward to in the fall.
Dillon Gabriel has seen a few spring games himself in a few different locations. He's kind of made his trips across the country, and he's made it all the way out to the West Coast now. And of course, we're going to pop up his numbers here. I went the career route with everybody else, 2023, but I just thought I'd wow people with the sheer volume of statistics that this guy has amassed. But then again, he replaces a guy that's pretty much done the same. Just your thoughts about Bo Nix, Dillon Gabriel seem to be pretty much on the same level.
I think they're on a similar level. I think Nix is a touch higher. I think his physical traits are greater than Gabriel. I think he's got, just a little bit more speed. He's certainly got more size and a bit more arm strength. But, that's not to say that Dillon Gabriel isn't a good quarterback. He was one of the most highly coveted guys in the portal for a reason, and his experience is part of that, but his production is a part of that as well. You look at what he did last season and the year prior at Oklahoma, he was not the biggest issue that the Sooners had. And when he missed that Texas game, they got blown out. And when he came back for the Texas game, they won. So his impact on the field is pretty evident. He almost completed 70% of his passes last year. He could go over that number in this system that Bo Nix ran, in which, Nix hadn't completed a lot of passes when he was at Auburn. Gets to Oregon, new system, new scheme, new players around you, new head coach, everything, and he, of course, thrived. And, I think Gabriel can step in and, just be a plug-and-play starter who what you're going to get. You know what you're going to get from him, and, I'm excited to have him, and certainly I think that Oregon is as well.
Of course, Ty Thompson said, okay, enough of this. I'm out of here. I've been waiting quite a long time. And Oregon, while other teams across the country are battling it out for that number 1 quarterback spot or trying to figure out what they're going to have down the line, Oregon, now things change in college football like that, seem to be set up for today and set up for tomorrow, of course, with Dante Moore. And Ducks fans had to be excited about that acquisition.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very unique situation. You don't just bring in someone who is a high-level backup quarterback who's got immense talent and starting experience, but you bring in somebody who is, penciled, not written in pen, but penciled in to start for your team in 2025. I don't know, other than Ohio State, that anybody in the country has done that. The Buckeyes bring in Will Howard for his final year. Then for next season, they've got Aaron Nolan, they've got Devin Brown, they've got Julian Sayin, the Alabama transfer. It'll be one of those guys. And so even that is, more of an open question, I think, than, what the Ducks have got here with the Dante Moore situation. So if, God forbid, Dillon Gabriel goes down with an injury, you have a talented guy who has got starting experience at the Power 5 level. And, for next season, you could have him learning behind a veteran quarterback in a quarterback-friendly system, taking the time to really understand the scheme, and then step in with all the talent in the world. I mean, he could be an NFL sort of guy. Dante Moore could be if he reaches his full potential. And I think that this is a great quarterback room, one of the best in all of college football, maybe the best if you go 1-2. I mean, Ohio State's got plenty of talent, but they don't have anyone with Dante Moore's experience there. Now, it wasn't all pretty experience, but still, a lot of time young backup quarterbacks are, well, he's talented, but we don't know what we've got, right? And so, Moore as a backup, I think is better than Ty Thompson as a backup. And I'm very excited to see what Ty Thompson does at Tulane. I think all Oregon fans are rooting for that kid. He stuck it out at Oregon and wanted to have his shot. Don't know what exactly that shot looked like, but certainly, I could have seen a world where he was Oregon's starting quarterback in 2024. Instead, it ends up being Dylan Gabriel, and I think that for the Ducks, that is a really good situation, and I hope that Ty Thompson succeeds. But as for the Ducks, their quarterback room, once again, really, really strong up and down the depth chart.
Spencer, you mentioned it not always looking pretty for Dante Moore, but that's the case for most first-time starting quarterbacks, especially as a true freshman. At one point, it looked like he was vying for the all-time pick six record. But do you feel with Dan Lanning, obviously he's a defensive guy, that they have the system in place, quarterback development tools as a coaching staff to get him where he would eventually need to be?
Yeah, Will Stein is the key as offensive coordinator, and Stein's one of the best in college football. In his first year at the power level as an OC last year, coming over from UTSA, finished somewhere inside the top 8 to 10, I think, for the Broyles Award, given to the nation's top assistant or coach or coordinator. And, he was well deserving of that. He was behind Bo Nix, completing the highest percentage of passes of any quarterback in the history of college football last year at about 77.4%. And I think that his track record with quarterbacks is very good. His track record with offenses across the board, not just being a passing attack or just a rushing attack, but having a good amount of balance. It's very strong in his last two stops, including Oregon and UTSA. So I like Stein a lot as an OC, and I think that Dante Moore getting the chance to understand why he calls plays the way he does, how to execute his offense, and it's a very execution-driven offense. It's, hey, the ball is designed to go here. You need to be able, when Bo Nix was at his best last year, survey the defense, understand the coverage, the route concepts, and the play that you have, any checks at the line of scrimmage, and know exactly where to go. And Bo Nix had a pretty good amount of freedom last year in the offense. And Dylan Gabriel, according to Will Stein, is going to have that again, and all the quarterbacks will. And that's, integral to understanding what they are trying to accomplish on that side of the ball. And Bo Nix put on a masterclass last year. And, if Dante Moore had been able to watch that, heck, maybe he'd be Oregon's starter this year if he'd never decommitted from the Ducks in the first place. But, Dillingham went down to ASU, so I understood it. But I think that he's in a situation now where you've got a veteran quarterback, you've got the offensive coordinator, you got a head coach who, is still involved with the development of the quarterback, certainly, and has got a good track record, at least so far, in his head coaching tenure in the 2 years that Bo Nix had. You look at what he did with the Ducks compared to what he did at Auburn, night and day. And I think that Dante Moore going into 2025, the pass catchers will be a question mark, because the top 4 pass catchers from this year will probably all be gone. That'll be Evan Stewart, wide receiver, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, and then Terrence Ferguson, the tight end. I think those will be Oregon's top 4 pass catchers. T. Ferg's the tight end. So, there'll be some new faces there, but it'll be a lot of guys who Dante Moore is running with at practice. He'll run with the twos and, develop chemistry with those guys. And I think that is going to be a talented room, just might not be quite as experienced in his first year starting for the Ducks in 2025.
And one other note before we get to the rest of the weapons that you're alluding to there, Spencer. Will Stein being who he is, and Dylan Gabriel, despite all those reps as a veteran quarterback, he's been known to go into a funk here and there and sail some throws. So maybe they tighten some things up with him, and he's able to be just a little bit better. It can't be too much better, but a little bit better for this Oregon offense.
Yeah, I think Bo Nix was pretty perfect for what they were doing last year. I don't know that you can be better than what Bo Nix was. The Pac-12 championship game, everyone would like to have that one back, and still they lost by just 3 points. But, if Oregon wins that game, Bo Nix wins the Heisman Trophy. And you can't get better than that. So I don't expect, and I don't think Oregon needs Dylan Gabriel to be at that level. Does he have to be an above average quarterback? Yeah, he should be one of the 3 best in the Big Ten, which is actually a pretty weak quarterback conference, but Gabriel should be the best quarterback on the field in just about every game that he plays, right? You can look at Will Howard at Ohio State and say, all right, might depend on the day, because I think Howard's got more potential than what he showcased at Kansas State. He's got better weapons, better offensive staff behind him. up there in Columbus. So, that's one option for, a quarterback that could be better than Gabriel on the field. But everywhere else you look, Will Rogers at Washington, very solid. I think he's very solid. I like Gabriel a little bit more, but I think Gabriel and Rogers are kind of in the same sort of class. They're both experienced veteran guys playing their last years of college football. They've thrown a lot of passes, been very productive, and they've learned from some good coaches. Will Rogers was under the late Mike Leach at Mississippi State. That's as good of an offensive mind as you'll find in all of college football, really, history. So I think that for Gabriel, the standard should be being well above average, but it doesn't need to be a Heisman expectation. That's not where my mind is at with him, and I don't think Oregon necessarily needs him to play at a Heisman level in order to make the playoff.
I think you're being a bit conservative and a bit kind to the rest of the Big Ten, because I think Dillon Gabriel may not have the highest ceiling, as you just pointed out, but I think he's the surest commodity at quarterback in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Will Howard fan, so I put them in the same class, but certainly I was actually looking at this on Locked On College Football just the other day, and yeah, the Big Ten lineup of quarterbacks is not very impressive. You got some guys that have got high ceilings, but we don't really know what the floor of production is at. Guys like Aiden Childs at Michigan State, Miller Moss at USC. Then you've got the high floor guys like Dillon Gabriel, like Will Howard, like Will Rogers. I think Curtis Rourke at Indiana, who transfers from Ohio, very experienced veteran guy, high floor, but I don't know that any of those guys have a supremely high ceiling. And then you have a wild card like Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. And, I was talking about it in the context of the Cornhuskers' new signal caller of, whether or not he could be a top 3 or 4 quarterback in the Big Ten. He could. I mean, he could right away. If he is someone who it just, the light goes on and it clicks and you're engaging in college football in a way that makes you comfortable and explosive at the quarterback position, yeah, Raiola could be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, because it's just not a very deep quarterback conference. And that's going to be a big change for Duck fans who were in the best quarterback conference in recent memory, frankly, last year in the Pac-12. It was crazy how good the quarterbacks were in that league. You had Caleb Williams, you had Michael Penix, you had Bo Nix, you had Shedeur Sanders, you had Cam Ward up at Washington State. It was just a really, really good league, and Cam Rising, Utah didn't even play because of injury. So I think it is going to be different in that sense, but I think Gabriel on any given day is the best quarterback in the Big Ten. I don't know that it's every day, but I think it's a lot more days than not.
Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks, Locked On College Football. You've got all the locations right there. Please follow Spencer. You will not regret it. Talking Ducks here and looking at the offense. You mentioned Evan Stewart and what you expect to be the top 4 pass catchers. Of course, he suffered to a certain extent from injury at quarterback, play calling issues, Bobby Petrino's first offense at Texas A&M, all sorts of dysfunction there at College Station. Caught 38 balls last year, but this guy's a former 5-star, and sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, I mean, he comes in and looks to be a perfect replacement for Troy Franklin, who will be the highest drafted Oregon receiver, I think, of all time, certainly of my lifetime by a lot. And I expect Stewart and Gabriel to be able to match, the way that Gabriel delivers the deep ball and the way that Stewart just takes the top off the defense. And he's just got the entire toolkit, speed, route running, hands, contested catches, leaping. It's all there. This is an NFL caliber wide receiver, and I would not be surprised in the slightest if he leads Oregon in receiving yards this year. Now, I don't think that's a guarantee, because Dillon Gabriel's favorite target last year at Oklahoma was Drake Stoops, and he now has a better version of Drake Stoops in Tez Johnson, Bo Nix's younger brother. So I think that chemistry is going to be really, really good. And I think Gabriel, who, when I watched him at Oklahoma last year, my biggest concern with him from time to time was he would lock onto one guy and not always get through his progressions tremendously well. And I think you'll see him look at Tez Johnson first on a lot of plays this year, because that's the kind of guy who he had great chemistry with a season ago with the Sooners and company. So the wide receivers are among the best in college football. I mean, Trayshawn Holden is your number 3 receiver. That guy could be a number 1 a number of places. Tremendously talented guy, big body, really fast, can make contested catches, solid route runner. I really like Trayshawn Holden. He's explosive. And, if he has a better season than he did last year, I wouldn't be surprised at that either. But, I'm curious to see, as you get the numbers pulled up here on YouTube, the amount that Dylan Gabriel gets his running backs involved in the passing game. Because Bo Nix, got the moniker by critics of captain check down and everything like that. And the reality is he was just very smart going through the progression of the offense and was not afraid to throw the ball to running backs when applicable. And I think Oregon's going to have two really, really good ones again this year at the top of the depth chart.
Spencer, you're causing me to grab my glasses. I was a bit surprised to see Bucky Irving at 56 catches as soon as you said about checkdowns by Bo Nix.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, you can certainly say is one of the bigger knocks against him going into the NFL draft. He does not always give the play enough time to push it down the field, or he doesn't want to take shots down the field, and he's more than willing to take yardage underneath. Now, in a lot of situations, especially, towards the end of the first or second half, that tends to work out very well because defenses are just trying not to give up the big play. Well, if you try not to give up the big play against Bo Nix, he's going to take he will nickel and dime you to death. And there was, plenty of RPO in this Oregon offense last year as well that I think factored into that. But yeah, 56 receptions is a pretty solid number for a running back. It's a pretty hefty number, frankly. I mean, you look at Gary Bryant and Trayshawn Holden; those are two wide receivers for the Ducks, and those were their 3 and 4 receivers at the wideout spot last year. They combined for 67 catches, so only 11 more than Bucky had on his own. So, that created a lot of really, really good plays and was, of course, great for Oregon's offense all throughout the year. And I'm curious to see how Gabriel's approach, differs from Bo Nix with the way, or the frequency with which they push it down the field, which certainly Oregon did. Duck fans have seen an offense that doesn't push it down the field. Just go watch Anthony Brown and Mario Cristobal and company in 2021. That offense didn't go down the field ever. That was a lot of dink and dunk. But certainly, could they take more deep shots? Sure. But go look at the offensive numbers and tell me why they need a philosophical change on how they want to score points.
Bucky's gone. Jordan James. Now, talking about the numbers here, 7.1 yards per carry. That's tough to do, especially with that many carries. And he matched Irving with 11 touchdowns.
Yeah, James, I think... I don't know. It's first of all, love Jordan James. And I think Oregon's running backs are outstanding again for 19th year in a row that I've been watching Oregon football. I mean, Oregon has just been, not always putting the guys in the pros that have big careers, right? Like Jonathan Stewart's been a bit of an outlier there. Certainly, Royce Freeman is still bouncing around the league and whatnot. But in college, Oregon's running backs have just been good over and over and over and over again. It has been a huge, huge part of the program's success over the last 2 decades. And, Jordan James can be the next great back. And I think he reminds me a lot of, little bit better version perhaps of CJ Verdell, who was a very effective runner for the Ducks. He's downhill, kind of one cut sort of guy, very physical, hard to stiff up at the line of scrimmage and drive backwards because he's always falling forward. But, PFF actually had him graded higher than Bucky Irving last year, and you can see the numbers. The efficiency was even better. And Bucky is someone who has a unique running style with the way that he'll put his foot in the ground, and he's got great lateral movement and just a really hard guy to tackle. James is physical, and there were times last year, not all the time, but there were times where the Pac-12 championship game, for instance, where it felt like Jordan James should have been the number one back instead of Bucky Irving because Bucky was bottled up and James was making plays here and there. So it could be James, but I just would not sleep on Noah Whittington. He didn't play a ton last year because he got injured against Colorado in week 4. But, Jordan James was the same guy who we all saw last year, and the coaches saw him all through spring camp and fall camp. And yet coming into the year, they had Whittington ahead of him on the depth chart, because Whittington was the number 2 back the prior year. And if Whittington, who's coming off an injury, is fully healthy, I could absolutely see him being the number 1 back. But I could see it being Jordan James. I think in all likelihood, this is a 2-headed monster, and it's a really, really good one.
And Spencer, of course, people are excited about Jay Harris and what he could possibly bring as well.
Yeah, comes over from Northwest Missouri State where he was a D2 All-American. Big guy. 6'1", 215 pounds. I don't think he's going to kill anybody with his speed necessarily, though certainly he's got enough to, bust some big runs, but there's a lot of tape out there on him because he's coming from Division II Northwest Missouri State. But, someone who runs with a lot of balance, kind of gives you Najee Harris vibes. And I think he could be a short yardage back for the Ducks, and they've had one traditionally each of the last 2 seasons with Dan Lanning at the helm. And so I wonder if that isn't the role that he serves that might have been, former freshman Dante Dowdell's before he transferred to Nebraska this offseason to go be in the backfield with Dylan Raiola, which is a place where I think Dowdell could certainly thrive. But, I think for Harris, he has the potential, he at least has the physical traits to be that short yardage specialist. And in 2022, it was Jordan James. And I think in 2023, it was going to kind of be Jordan James again until Whittington got hurt. And now everyone's seen what Jordan James can do, and he's going to have a feature role. And Whittington is certainly, a feature role back as well, who's probably the best pass catcher of this group of backs. So I'm curious to see if Harris carves out a role for himself. I won't be overly shocked, though, if it's on the minimal side.
Now, Spencer, Terrence Ferguson's a guy that you mentioned. I didn't know a whole lot about him prior to 2023, but I was certainly impressed, as was everybody else, with what he provides for the offense. He was outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I was a part of the Terrence Ferguson fan club from the moment I started hosting Locked On Ducks. And so the first season where I, covered Oregon on the show was 2022. And I said going into the year after T. Ferg's true freshman campaign in 2021, that this is a dude. This is a guy right here. And in 2022, he had a good year. And then last year, he put it on display a bunch of times. I think he had one drop all season, and his yards after he just looks like an NFL guy to me. I don't know all the metrics about how he is as a blocker, but certainly as a pass catcher, the way he moves in space, he's got tremendous athleticism, really good hands. He made some brutally tough catches this year. You look at the first touchdown of 2 he caught in the Pac-12 title game. He's snaring it with one hand in the back corner of the end zone and toe tapping his feet. There's one against Utah as well. He runs a corner route, and he's kind of sandwiched in between the corner and safety, and Bo Nix, seeing the corner to, the right side of the field towards the sideline, kind of throws it behind him, and he reaches back behind his body, and he snares it, and then 2 guys converge on him, and he holds onto the ball. He's just a guy who, can break tackles, great speed at the tight end spot. From what I see, he does a really, really good job in the run and pass game blocking as well. Oregon runs a lot of sprint out concepts with Bo Nix, and T. Ferg is usually the guy blocking the defensive end, and he's been very good at that. And Oregon's run the ball well, and you can't do that if you don't have a tight end who can block. He can, and as a pass catcher, he is high level. And Will Stein, the OC, said in an interview going into spring football that he's got to find a way to get him the ball more. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I didn't feel like Oregon's offense was missing anything really last year. But I think he's someone who certainly is just a fantastic red zone target.
I get the feeling that could be said about like 6 guys on this offense. We would like to get him the ball more. There's only so many plays.
Yeah, so. There are only so many plays, and you got to call what's working and what defense is doing and everything. I mean, Oregon's 3rd string tight end might be the best athlete of the bunch, and that's Kenyon Sadiq. True freshman last year, played a little bit. He's got, he's the sort of tight end you give the ball to on fly sweeps. Those tight ends don't come around very often, but he's that kind of guy. And I think Oregon's tight end room is utterly fantastic.
Spencer McLaughlin. Always enjoy the conversation with Spencer. You can catch him on a regular basis every day. Let's do it. Locked on Ducks, Locked on College Football. There we go. Okay, the offensive line, of course, those are the guys that make it go. They lost 4 going into 2023 and still performed there. Josh Connerly's the guy that everybody knows. Of course, he had his first year as a true freshman at left tackle. They picked up a pretty good offseason acquisition in Matthew Bedford from Indiana. So size it up front for us.
I love the O-line. And, I didn't have super high hopes for the O-line last year. I figured they'd take a step back from 2022, which they did. But that's only because 2022 was this close, I think, to winning the Joe Moore Award. They were crazy good and experienced. and then they just reset, and it was all a seamless transition. Jackson Powers Johnson slides over to center, wins the Remington Award. Oregon has had some great centers. You think Hronis Grasu, go back to Max Unger, who had a great NFL career. Jake Hansen was an All-American. Jackson Powers Johnson, probably the best out of all of them. I mean, guy just absolutely mauled people, crazy athletic, and will be a high pick in the NFL draft. But the guy who's going to replace him also looks to be a young, bona fide stud, and that's Iapani Lalaulu, or Poncho, as he's known. So his older brother has been at Oregon the last couple of years, was part of the jumbo package last year. He's a student assistant now on that Oregon staff, and Poncho was the 6th offensive lineman for the Ducks last year. And in the Fiesta Bowl win against Liberty, JPJ opted out. Poncho was the center. He was the backup center last year, and everything was seamless. And I mean, he was, when the game was still in question or in doubt, he would go in for starters, like 6th year Stephen Jones or 4th year Marcus Harper. Those guys were, regularly getting subbed out because, hey, Poncho's getting some run here, and we'll just give you a breather. And there was no drop off. There was never a drop off. He can play left, right, or right guard. He'll be Oregon center. You've got Connerly at left tackle. Johnny Cornelius arguably had a better year than Josh Connerly last year, and Connerly was quite good. Took a big step forward, and I expect him to take another one. But Oregon's got a 27, 28-year-old offensive line coach named Malik Terry. That guy knows what he's doing. I mean, he took a brand new unit, essentially, and made them every bit as good, just about as they were the year before. And I think that this year's offensive line, you lose Jax Powers Johnson, I have a hard time believing that Poncho can be as good as he was. But again, I just don't see a major drop-off here. And you return essentially 4 starters, right? Like Poncho played a starter's number of snaps throughout the course of the year, so he's going to be a starter. Harper's back at left guard, and you return your 2 tackles, and then you bring in a 6th-year transfer from Indiana. Well, that just feels like the new Stephen Jones to me. Jones is, was a big guy and had his 6th year of college football last year. Here comes Matthew Bedford, and I think that that's your starting 5 up front, and I think that is one of the best units in the Big Ten.
Did you say a late 20s offensive line coach? Those guys are supposed to be like 70.
Yeah. No, Alik Terry. Let me double check his age, because he is a young guy, and he's got he's got an older coach, kind of behind him. Alik Terry was playing college football in 2017. That was his senior year, so that would have been 7 years ago, and. So he might be 20. I think he's 28 right now. But yeah, he is just a rising star is what it looks like, because you don't have a lot of position coaches under the age of 30. And, he's got Mike Cavanaugh, who's a very experienced offensive line coach in college football, as his assistant O-line coach. And I think that's great for him to, help show him the ropes and everything. But that's Terry's unit, and he's the premier recruiter for that position with the Ducks. And, he's done a great job recruiting, and the development and production has just been awesome.